Tonight, the Mau Forest is back in the headlines and it's gone political. While the players remain the same, the position seems to have shifted. Also, who's telling the truth on the Ruaraka land scandal and what is the truth even? Plus, the state of corruption through the eyes of lawmakers, opinion shapers and skeptics. Is the glass half full or half empty? But first, my take. Now, yesterday, we watched in amazement as former KPLC Managing Director Ben Chumo sat before the National Assembly's Departmental Committee on Finance and Planning to undergo the mandatory vetting of all public officers nominated by the President for possible appointment. Now, Chumo was in cuffs barely a fortnight ago, and it was therefore appalling that Parliament even gave him audience, which did not go down well with not just a section of parliamentarians, but with Kenyans, a number of who expressed their displeasure on social media. But we are a country of the rule of law and not of men. National Assembly leader, that's Majority Leader Eden Duale, described the vetting as an exercise in futility. It was brazen coming from a parliament that's been accused of being the executive's rubber stamp. Now, this is no doubt a test of President Uhuru Kenyatta's commitment to his own affront on graft. Now, the resolve to uproot the deeply entrenched wheeler dealers. The president's only remedy to the growing list of corruption scandals is action. All suspected looters be forced out, those found guilty, jailed, and all the proceeds of corruption be reverted to the public. Now, the president himself said he was aware of corruption's destructive legacy. Public service has almost ground to a halt. Now, the country's infrastructure is on the brink of collapse due to poor workmanship. The country's public health and education are in shambles. The list is endless. Even so, we remind the president that he made several such pledges in the past, but little came out of them. Notably, back in 2015, he sacked several top government officials, among them cabinet secretaries, over corruption and decreed they be tried and convicted. But the cases later collapsed and some contested and even won top political positions in the country. Mr. President, the heads must roll. In the words of the late Billy Graham, the greatest legacy one can pass to one's children is not money or material things, but rather a legacy of character and faith. My guest tonight, Joshua Kiptoo, Speaker of the Nandi County Assembly, Moses Kajwang, Senator Homa Bay County, Joshua Kutuny, Member of Parliament, Cherangany, and Scheaffer Okore from Siasa Place. And I am Ken Mijungu. Welcome to Sidebar. We begin right now.
I bought that property from Peter Kenyatta, Ada Magugu, Duncan Degwa of Central Bank, and the late Jenga Karume.
The company had applied for subdivision through a development company, but they disagreed with the Department of Planning at City Hall, and the subdivision never went through. And that is how the land is still private land.
These are public utilities. That is the Nandi Primary School,
yes,
the Ruaraka High School, and the GSU headquarters.
Okay.
If there is another land apart from what I've mentioned, then that is another case. But for these public utilities, these are public land.
Those are no less the words of the Senator, Nairobi County, and the CS lands, and also the owner of that land that is being investigated right from the top. A disclaimer, we have the PAC chairperson here who sits at the Senate committee, and obviously there are some things we will not be talking to him about, but we'll try and make him as comfortable as possible with Ruaraka land. And that's where we begin. And I'd like to begin with the only lady in the audience, and this has raged on for a while. It's been there for a while. I'd like your initial comments on Ruaraka. We've seen the back and forth on Ruaraka.
Wow. Corruption. I mean, that's the height of theft, right? And that's the height of brazen theft. And we're just talking about it with Kiptoo. That's the height of brazen theft, where somebody knows very well that this is something that I shouldn't touch, right? And they go and they sell it. And someone genuinely buys it. and they're given a document that says you own this land, which I legally acquired. And then now I throw you out because you're a nobody, and then we are going after the untouchables. This is brazen theft. This is how Kenya works. I lack words, because I feel like we've gotten to a place where we're not even defining what corruption is, because we refuse to call it theft, and we're still calling it beautiful names to make it palatable, so that the Waheshimiwas who are behind such kind of stolen property don't feel uncomfortable. These are thieves, right?
Who are the thieves here?
I wish I could tell, because everybody's scared of talking about
these thieves. But you say it's outright theft.
It is outright theft. When that guy has mentioned, the guy in the video who has talked about, exactly, he's mentioned people's names who sold this land to him. Why are we not seeing these people anywhere being asked questions, hard questions, right? He's mentioned them outrightly in public. He's not hidden them. He's not said, a guy came in a blue suit. He said, Ken Mijungu sold me this land. I got it from X person. Why are we not talking to these people? Why are we going after the small people? And this is what happens every time.
Mheshimiwa Kutuny.
Thank you, thank you. I think regarding the Ruaraka issue, I am not more interested on what Mr. Mburu is saying, but I am more interested on what the Cabinet Secretary is saying. Because she's the custodian, or the Ministry of Lands is the custodian of all the documents related to land, particularly the public land. And the minister, she's talking about the land still private land. And I want to say that I sit in the Lands Committee Parliament. We investigated on the matter. We made our own findings. We wish we had more time. But today, I saw something on the papers when Amina appeared before Senate.
Yesterday.
And there are two fundamental issues which we need to agree to with Senate. That if there are issues that we are investigating, and it is the same issue, I think the Speaker now will have to reach a point where a ruling must be made. So then we have a joint investigation, and we come up with the same findings. However, being the case, we've made recommendations as the committee, because we found that the way the land was acquired, some steps were skipped.
Back in 1982? Or
from 1982.
Or when the government was acquiring it?
But where, and I want to emphasize this point, more documents that we rely on making decisions are the documents from government offices, government institutions. Now, the biggest question in this Ruaraka issue is that the land 78, LR number 7879/4, was it subdivided? Was the survey carried? And who did the survey? And if the survey was done, was the deed plan generated by the surveyor of Kenya? And if they were generated, were they registered? That is the point that we are today.
All right.
But we've made our recommendations. And we have already mentioned that there are some people who must take responsibility on the process. Yes.
And I know the Public Accounts Committee is investigating the monetary angle of this, not necessarily the ownership of the land, but you can't divorce them. I'll talk to you about that. But Kiptoo, watching from the sidelines, looking at what the Mzee said and looking at the words that, contradicting words, I dare say, from everyone who's spoken about this. Yes.
I think my opinion is simple. Just let us mark the red flags in that particular transaction. Where does it begin from? It begins from 82. It begins from when the time the government, it was said that the government wanted to use the land, and importantly, we have public utilities. The first red flag in Kenya when it comes to brazen theft, as Scheaffer has talked about, compensation is always the easiest way to steal money. Every time we have a project being undertaken, quite a chunk of the money is lost from the government because compensation is where everything is inflated. Secondly, compensation in the sense that, for example, it has been noted the land was maybe private, it is government, and government wants to buy it. Now that always opens the red flag. That is the first thing. Secondly, I want us to focus on something. We never follow the trail of documents. I want us to follow the former office holders, the late Oro Jode, when he himself, he raised a query and say, how can a government buy land that was government? Because where the trail is rose, of which Mheshimiwa has talked about, when you talk about the land processes,
in Parliament?
Yes, the main red flag was it seems the government was buying from itself. Number two, there was a question as to the size of land, and that's why you throw in the issue of subdivision. Importantly, where now, as you say, as a bystander, what intrigues me is the haste in which the money was approved.
A record 2
right
months.
From the ministry all the way to the parliament, and there was a dilly-dally, so you could see some push and pull. I'll single out the Ministry of Education, because for them, there's a public school there. What was their significant interest? Why were they the one pushing so hard? Secondly, what was so important for the National Land Commission, and those are the red flags I'm talking about. The National Land Commission, you find the chair himself personally overseeing the file, personally undertaking and writing in his own name. Now that gives you the red flag. Then importantly, Parliament's approval, the time that Parliament approved the payment or the disbursement of the same money, it was at a time when the one is, you couldn't find the keenness that was needed. Then lastly, when the money was released, the 1.5B, that is the first tranche, what happened? It went to a single account, and then it was transferred to a different account, and then immediately split up in record
20 days.
A very short period of time.
20 days.
Now,
precisely.
those are red flags. Okay. Forensic evidence will tell you. Let me give you, for example, I work for a county government. Even us at the county government, by the time we requisition and get the money and pay, it can't take that fast. Now, forensic evidence will tell you, why would we distribute this so fast? Secondly, you find contradiction. Like today, if you find the cabinet secretary for the first time acknowledging and saying, on behalf of the ministry, we ask that the committee from the Senate question the predecessor. That already gives you the red flag. That is a sign of admission, but in terms of bashbacking, saying, check the other guy.
But you're going to the far end.
Yes.
You're talking about distribution.
Yeah.
Why don't we concentrate in the manner in which it was released? Because distribution, if you're given money, you can do with it whatever you want. So the fundamental question is how the money was released. One, was it compensation for a private property that was being bought by the government, right? That's the most fundamental as he raises it. Yes.
Now, in fact, the reason why I support the twin investigation, I'll be sorry to disagree with Honorable Joshua Kutuny. National Parliament took on this matter very quickly and then kind of slowed down on it, and the Senate is picking it so fast. And the thing the Senate are doing are the questions you've raised on the processes. First question is, whose land was it? Was it a private land? Was it previously a government land? Because where I took keen interest was, how comes the late Assistant Minister Oro Jode raised a query and say he has a problem with the stature, because according to their investigation by then, they pointed out that that was government land. So how comes it went to private land? That is the first process. Secondly, if it was about transfer, how was valuation done? Where you only value a land that has title, that has been surveyed, of which rightfully the National Assembly picked out that those processes were not followed. Ministry of Land is not the best person you can rely upon when it comes to the documentation. I've practiced law, and one of the reasons why in legal practice we charge premium in conveyance, to be honest with you, it's about authenticity. There's no guarantee of an authentic title unless and when you have insiders. So I think where the Senate committee, whatever the Public Accounts Committee sits, for them is to tie the loose ends. But importantly, for the rest of us who are out here, we can already pick out the easy red flags and say, okay, this one, why does it end this way? So I think where Senator Kajwang sit, for them they're able to tie the loose end and in fact mention them. I wouldn't want a case whereby we just give round recommendation. Even in my assembly where I sit, I always say we have to be specific. We have to mention who, why, when.
That's a very, it's unheard of in the country sometimes. They don't mention names, they give blanket reports. But let's talk to Kajwang. It's easy, or it's very difficult to ask you this question now that you're the one, the latest committee investigating this. But perhaps point us to what you're looking at.
Well, Ken, I'll find it difficult to discuss this matter because the standing orders are clear. Kiptoo is a speaker, and he knows that we are prohibited from discussing the proceedings of committees before those proceedings are brought to the House for adoption.
Okay.
And I'll confine myself to issues that are already in the public domain.
Go ahead.
I think having said that, I've got a lot of depth of information and documents and records regarding this matter, and some of the issues that have been raised in the public domain, there are some that I can confirm are supported by evidence, and there are others that I would also say that no evidence has been tendered so far to support it. In the court of public opinion, this matter has been investigated, prosecuted, and judged. And in the court of public opinion, all parties involved are guilty of corruption and theft and plunder of public resources. Let us wait for the Senate committee to present its report. In the court of the National Assembly, Kutuny and his committee have also come up with a report where they have found certain parties to be guilty. But let me take us back to where we started from and how Senate got seized of this matter. Before devolution, primary schools in Nairobi were Kanjo. I went to a Kanjo school. I went to a city council school, Langata Road Primary, where they are busy trying to grab a piece of land to put up all sorts of things. I went to Rabai Road Primary in Jericho. It was a city council school under the management of the defunct Nairobi City Council. Secondary schools were also under the management partly of the then Ministry of Education, and some were under the management of communities. We have 2 schools in Ruaraka. We have Drive-In Primary and Ruaraka High School. One established in 1984, the secondary school, and the primary school established in 1987. When we visited the school, we found a Mr. Thuo, who has been on the board of management of these schools from inception. And he was able to narrate, particularly Ruaraka High School, not Drive-In Primary School. But because Drive-In came in 87, when in 1984 they had established Ruaraka High, he was very much familiar with the circumstances with which the schools were established. And he made it very clear to us that for more than 30 years, no one had ever come to tell them that these schools are built on private land. And over the years, government has poured in investments. The local member of parliament, TJ Kajwang, has been investing in these schools through CDF over the years. And then all of a sudden, a few months to elections, a claim comes through. Now, it is our duty now as a committee to consider whether it was a genuine claim or not. How does Senate come in? Because this afternoon, the National Assembly, I don't know whether it was for lack of business or for lack of priorities, they decided to set aside time to discuss why Senate is prosecuting matters that appear to be similar. Kutuny and the Lands Committee has got a very broad mandate over issues to do with land policy. In fact, they are the guys who oversight Swazuri, issues of compulsory acquisition of land, etc., etc. The policy we have in this country that makes it extremely expensive for government to carry out public projects because of a convoluted land policy. We could not even lay the pipeline through Kenya because of land compensation. We can't even expand Mombasa Road because crooks have built on road reserves. We are now subjecting poor people in Kibra to sleep in the cold because of poor land policies. So that's the domain of Kutuny's committee, and I hope that they're going to give us some light as far as that is concerned. The mandate of my committee is to make sure that assets of defunct local authorities are transferred to the national government, are not sold. That process was being midwifed by the Transition Authority, headed by Kinuthia. Kinuthia's term as TA ended without posting any positive results. We set up another one called ITGRC, Intergovernmental Technical Relations Committee, headed by Professor Karega Mutai. These then brought up something we call CALCs, County Asset and Liability Verification Committees. Their job is to assess what were the assets of the defunct local authorities, identify them, and then hand them over to the national government.
Okay.
Not
the county government.
No, to county or national.
Okay.
In the case
on
of
what
schools,
yes.
in the case of schools, because the schools were being managed by defunct local authorities,
goes to
they
the
will
county.
be handed over to the national government.
Okay.
Because schools are now, primary schools are now the domain of the national government.
Okay.
And so that is our entry point into this matter.
Okay.
Now, the broader question about Senate and National Assembly conducting investigations in a similar manner, that is a feature of bicameralism. We made the decision to have a bicameral parliament. It is like Kiptoo making a decision to be a polygamist. He will have 2 houses to sleep in. And for him to make decisions, he will have to consult both houses. When Mark Zuckerberg had to be grilled by the US Congress over issues of, I think it was Cambridge Analytica, yes, and the breach of privacy.
Selling of data.
We saw Mark Zuckerberg go to the House of Representatives day one, and the next day he was in Senate.
Same thing.
And the questions were fairly the same.
Okay.
But you could see that when he went to Senate, there was some depth.
So this has nothing to do with you not having responsibilities?
No, absolutely not. It is a feature of bicameralism.
Okay.
It is something that we must expect to see
Okay.
until we go for that referendum and decide that we are going bicameral rather than bicameral.
Ken, there is something that I want to put it very straight, and it is good that he has also brought it up. And I want to assure Senator and the Kenyans that we, as the Committee of Lands, we've risen to the occasion. Because of the poor planning, we realized that there was no law or act to guide planning, urban areas, rural areas. And for that case, as a Committee of Lands, we've come up with fiscal planning bill that is going to make sure that there is proper planning in terms of roads and any other public utility that is going to come. Even it is going to guide the private development. That is one. On the issue of valuation, because one of the issues that has been disputed, not only on Ruaraka issue, it is also on Standard Gauge Railway, of valuation.
Yes.
We've talked about the people in various offices who are bestowed with the responsibility of doing valuation, giving double price or value of the land. So then this value index bill is the government is going to come up with standard valuation for properties across the country. There will be cut line for the valuation. So this one is going to ensure that you cannot overvalue when the government is compensating or is buying property.
Do you think that happened in Ruaraka? The case of Ruaraka?
You know, that was one of the most serious issues. And we have said that several people in National Lands Commission to be held responsible, including also the department that deals with valuation.
Okay.
And that one we...
What is the concern with the valuers, the guys, the people who did the valuation? What is the concern?
You know, when you get two valuations, because this is how we analyze the whole thing, we went to the next property and we got the valuation.
Okay.
And we got the valuation that had been put on the table by the valuers of Afrison Company. And of course, there were disparities. And then two, even members of parliament, they visit that place. And then also, they will raise concern on the value that has been put on the property.
The one that was put by the owners or the one that was put later after the owners presented?
Of course, you know, in the land acquisition, the process is very clear. When you send it your documents to the government, you send it with the valuation.
Yes.
And then the government, through NLC, will do a counter valuation.
Okay, so which one was higher? I'm interested in knowing which one was higher.
Of course, in this case,
yes,
the one from government was higher.
Was higher. Okay.
So,
because the Mzee has made it known that he sold the land for 200 million shillings less of the market value.
That is an argument that can be followed.
That's what he said.
For us, we said, this is not the only issue that we are realizing that there is the problem with the valuation.
Okay.
We realize also the same plus disparities in valuation during SGR, when the land was being acquired along this Narok and part of Kajiado. And that's why we are informed by that to come up with this value index bill, which is now on the floor of the House.
Okay.
So, yes.
I have a few questions that unlock Senator Kajwang out of it. And the first thing that I'd like to know from the three of you is, if this was public land, right in the 80s, right, how comes there is a claim right now from no less than the CS that this is private land?
You know, there is something else that must be understood. The reason why government is claiming, or some quarters of government is claiming that this is private public land, the land LR number that I've said 7879/4 is 98 acres.
96.
Around 96
It's 96,
acres.
yes.
So the reason why government is claiming this part is that when you do subdivision before you do development, you must apply for subdivision before you do development. And if you do that, you must surrender 10% of the total acres. So if it is 5 acres, you must surrender 10% of that. So in this case, government expected the 10% to have been surrendered to the government for subdivision to have taken place. Now there are two issues that are coming up.
But even before you go to the two issues, one, if it's 96 acres, 10% ordinarily should be 9.6. Exactly. The school sits on 13.5.
Yes, yes.
How did that happen?
Those are the issues that came to the committee.
Okay.
That what we expected, 9.8. Here, it is being claimed 13 point. So, was there a survey that was carried out?
Yeah, because there's discrepancy 13.5 and 13.7 again.
Exactly. Was this 98 acres or 105? And remember, by the way, on this matter, and I want to put it into public, I am the one who raised this matter in 2010 when I was a member of parliament. Because government, I realized at that time that government was paying land rates on a private land, the land that JSU sits. I brought the matter to the National Assembly and I said, on what documentation
Are you paying the
that
rates?
does the government pay LR number 78 this thing? This is a private land. Why are you paying land rates?
Okay.
And the matter went to an extent where the committee at that time chaired by Kapondi investigated. And this process has been long, in fact, from 2010 up to today.
That's 8 years.
So the concern that most people have
Okay.
is the surrender, the 10%.
Surrender.
Was the surrender done?
And if it was done, do we have a deed?
So that is
Do we
true.
have a deed?
Then there is the issue of subdivision.
Yes.
Was subdivision done?
Done.
And if subdivision was done, how many pieces were
Let me answer.
developed
Let me
out
answer
of
that
it?
question.
Yes.
Let me answer that question.
Yes.
Has allocated over 800 plots illegally on my property. Okay?
How can I allocate 800 plots within 8 months?
Sonko has allocated over 800 plots illegally on my property. Okay?
How can I allocate 800 plots within 8 months in office?
Very important. I'd like to go to Scheaffer for this. Sonko has allocated over 800 plots. If these plots have been allocated, one, the LR number should not exist in the same manner. So have they been allocated?
Yeah.
I'm assuming they should have titles or allotment letters.
Yes.
Have we seen them? Have you seen them? Did you see them during your investigation?
There was an allotment. The only allotment that we saw was the primary for the primary school.
Okay.
Which was, I am sure, the same allotment is what Mheshimiwa was talking about.
Okay.
When we went there. But the main question again that arose when we called the Ministry of Land and the NLC is that when the land is freehold, then you don't issue allotment.
Okay.
So, and the same government issued title to AfriZone. The same government issued allotment to primary school. So that is why we were saying there are people, and that's why we had to say further investigation on the people we found culpable to have engaged in this thing.
It literally sounds like what happened after independence, and then Kenyatta Senior was supposed to claim back the stolen land or the white lands from the white settlers. And the British offered him money to buy back what was already ours, you know, and offered him a loan. So we had to pay them for what is already ours. It doesn't make sense. Okay. You know, it doesn't make sense. And those are some of the red flags amongst the very many red flags that you are raising, because there's so many illegal transactions and illegal actions that took place.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And I feel like I love the idea of we are going to conduct audits and investigations and do all these amazing things, but how many investigations have we done in this country?
All right.
Right?
As a lawyer, because we have to take a break, I mean, if part of that school was surrendered, right, to the government, out of the 96, let's assume it was 105, so they took the 13 point something, right? Yes. Have we seen the deed of surrender? I think I should go back to Kutuny for this before you answer. Have we seen the deed of surrender that shows that this land was given to the schools for amenities?
There was no deed of surrender.
So it means it never happened, because there must be a deed of surrender.
And that is why the title still reads the same company.
Okay.
Now, there was only, what we saw is a document and an agreement that was deposited with the NLC.
Okay.
Yes.
And my question was, how then did we set up a school there? What was the basis? Does it mean at the time the local authority, now at that time the municipal council was setting up the school, were they aware that that is public land or private land? So the main thing that I find about us as a country is that we are very insincere. Very insincere. Very basic things like that when it comes to public land, private land. We know the procedure, we know how it needs to be done, but we are going round circles. We know the thing. In fact, you've raised something that I think we need to focus our debate on. As a country, how much do we do when it comes to investigation? How much quality work do we do when it comes to audit? But importantly, do we put timelines toward those audit and investigation? And lastly, what happens to the recommendation? How bold are we to pick up that, piece together, take it to court, charge, surcharge, get this money back? How many times do we do that? We never do that. I think as a country, we love the drama. And the drama here is the way. And I think also the media plays a role in it in terms of showing who says what, when, where. But we never go to the details and follow the trail of the documents and say, why, how did we get here? And we, in fact, we dig back. At the end of the day, I'm looking forward with what the Senate and the National Assembly will give us, but importantly, what happens to those reports? I think the biggest challenge we have is that when we never implement them, when we never follow them, when we never put them into context and say what happens to this report, these are the findings, then we never get anywhere. That is why the first thing when you're giving your take, you are raising, how comes today you find someone being charged with the matter? You can imagine myself as a public officer being charged in court, and then tomorrow I'm still presiding over another public office. Don't you think that one, I like moral authority. In fact, I will lack moral authority to preside over the same. So I think that is where the lacking is.
Ken, I know you wanted to exclude me from this for obvious reasons that seized of the matter, but I wanted just to make a clarification. There is a place in Ruaraka called Babadogo, and we all know it, for those of us who are hustlers in Nairobi, and unless you are or Kutuny who lives in Karen. Babadogo was a man called D'Souza. In fact, his real name was D'Souza, but people around called him Babadogo, and that's why we have the Babadogo estate. Babadogo is the one who made the initial donation of land, and I think it was about 2 hectares. And that is a fact that we established when we visited the school. And that is a fact that was also captured in the Ministry of Education Task Force report that we were going through with the CS Amina Mohammed yesterday. And so when you do your percentages and it comes to 9, just consider that somebody else also made a donation for the schools to be established. Number 2, many schools in this republic do not have title deeds. Primary schools, secondary schools. I founded a school next to my home, and it was community land put together, and we built a school. That school does not have a title deed. What will happen if Kenyans decide that now it's time to make money, and we start demanding that we be paid for the land that schools have been built on? Imagine if someone would wake up today and claim that Upper Hill Secondary School, the land on which it sits, is his, and he needs to be compensated. Or someone decided that Nairobi Primary is private land and they need to be compensated. We have a huge crisis coming up ahead of us, and the manner in which we resolve this particular matter will guide us going forward. And finally, we are being too harsh on Parliament. The National Assembly Committee has done the investigations and submitted a report and made recommendations. The Senate is doing the same thing, and we shall make our recommendations. We cannot prosecute. In fact, if there are gaps in our findings, then investigative agencies should close those gaps. If, for example, you don't get the deed, and I can say that the governor Nairobi appeared before us and assured us that there was a deed, and I can say confidently that yesterday we received a letter from the CS for lands who confirmed what the governor of Nairobi said. But if there are going to be gaps in our reports, the DCI, EACC shall investigate further, the DPP shall prosecute, the judiciary shall make a ruling. We cannot be the ones in Parliament to do our findings and then prosecute and do the judicial process and then jail.
We're coming back to finish this discussion. I'd like to take a break at this point, but let me take a look at a few feedback from you. Let me see if we have feedback. Right, and that's Pascal Opio on Twitter says, Kenya is being stolen soon. We will no longer belong to Kenya. We will not belong to Kenya. One more. And in this country, we hang the petty thieves and appoint the great ones to public office. Sidebar takes a break. We'll be right back. Remember, the hashtag is Sidebar. I'm still here with my guest. When we come back, we'd like to conclude that discussion. Next, we are discussing the Mao issue. You don't want to miss that, so stay around. Stay with us. And welcome back to Sidebar. We're discussing the issue of Ruaraka. Next, we're discussing the issue of Mao. Let's finish this discussion, and I'd like to put it now to Scheaffer. Your conclusion on the matter, and Senator Kajwang has just mentioned that there's a letter from, is it Lance of the CS?
Yeah, there's a letter from Lance CS, who was supposed to appear before a committee yesterday, and who has made some interesting conclusions that confirm what the governor of Nairobi said. That
this is public land.
Yes.
That's what the governor said.
Well, that's what the letter says, because it was submitted before my committee, which was sitting in public. We are not sitting in camera. So I don't think there's no prejudice in saying that the CS Lands sent a letter saying that a surrender indeed happened.
But what happened the first time she sat before the committee and said this is, in fact, in her words, she said the schools risk being evicted. because this is private land.
Well, I don't know. I don't.
That's what she said first. We have the soundbite.
Yeah.
That's what she said first. Yes. So the contradiction in this. I think the only consistency that we hear here is one. At the risk of holding a brief for the old man, the only consistency is claiming the land is private and it's his. That's the only consistent thing we hear. But if the CS has now said something else, yes.
I feel like there's a lot of truth that needs to be unearthed, and I think everybody needs to play their part. And everybody playing their part means the people who are investigating, the people who are trying to seek for this truth, the people who are going to table it, the people who are going to follow up with it, the people who are going to ensure that everybody is held accountable for this need to come forth. Okay. There's a lot of misinformation that comes with things like this. And being the country that we are, you know, we will always rally up such a conversation and then drop it for the next one that comes up, which is dangerous for us because it means we are constantly piling upon other issues that have not been solved, issues that need addressing, you know, and it divides people. It makes people lose trust in leaders. It makes people lose trust in institutions because institutions are made of people. So we need people to unearth this truth. And if it will be Mheshimiwa or if it will be your committee, please do it. Okay. I mean, for the first time in this country...
What happens if it's a contradicting report? Have you considered that?
Yes, I have. I'd rather have a contradicting report than have no report at all that holds no ground.
Okay. And importantly, I don't think they'll be contradictory, but they'll be complementing. What they have picked for them and what they will add will be okay. Then secondly, I would want us to have a very different approach, which mostly applies to assemblies. When it comes to recommendations from a committee, I would love a case whereby we also give systemic recommendations or proposals, system change. Let me give an example. Honorable Kutuny has talked about a law that will be able to cap or to put a ceiling when it comes to valuation. That should be given with a timeline, that the Ministry of Land or the NLC is given within a period of time, and the budgetary allocation will be consistent with the same. Secondly, Boniface Mwangi and his team have always been going around talking about public schools not having titles. Yes. In the same recommendation, these two committees should come up and say, as a systemic problem, which we have noted, every time this thing recurs, that's why we see grabbing of school. So what happens? Let it be given that within 6 months, the Ministry of Land, when the minister appears before them, they not only ask them questions as to what happened, but rather ask them, can you give us a specific timeline within which all these public schools will have the title, so that at the end of the day, we are solving a problem by learning from the mistakes. Okay. But if we only sensationalize and talk about the issue, say who stole what, who took what, but we never say what are the institutional changes that needs to be done, and you insist on putting on a timeline. One of the biggest challenges assemblies we face is how we are able to tie the budgeted allocation to solution. We are more keen in allocating, but we don't focus on how can we be able to say this money we are allocating and this is what we expect. Next time, if such a problem recurs, we will start from that basis and say, last time we said as a change, in order to have a permanent solution, we recommended this. Was that followed? If not, a censor motion comes into play.
Okay, now that you began this, and you mentioned this was raised as far back as 2010, I'd like you to conclude on this matter. Could Ruaraka and drive-in be sitting on public or private land?
Now, I want to answer his issue that he had raised about the issue of schools. We identified that one as a perennial and a very long-term problem that has been there. So we've allocated 300 million in our committee during the budget, that every school by the end of the year must have the title, so that we avoid all these issues that are going on. Okay. So as a committee, we are concerned about these issues. Of course, you've talked about time frame. We've said the government will never engage on the issue any compensation if it has no budgetary. Okay. And now we are moving out the issue of vetting and the issue of the raising of the finance ministry concern. The parent ministry, if it is the Ministry of Roads, if it is education, those are the people who should look for money and identify land. So then NLC is not accused, because there is a lot of accusations around NLC. Of course, on this issue of Ruaraka, and Mheshimiwa has taken me back, if there are any documentation that has been produced. As a committee of lands, we did recommend that many people be investigated. Okay. Because this matter, there were many gray areas at that time. And then the committee, this is the first committee in Parliament to have had or handle a hot potato and handle it properly. Most committees will have dragged on this matter for a very long time. We say this matter when already the Senate had already said the matter. But I remember the discussion that we had with our colleagues. We said we set aside 2 weeks, because the more the matter drags, is the more the drama continues. Okay. We said Afro cinema should not continue on this matter. And we took record time, almost 1.5 months. We ventilated on the matter and we closed it.
Okay.
Now, on the issue if the land is public or private, we rely on the documentation that are there. We are still insisting that further investigation should be done on the people concerned.
Okay.
The people who did from subdivision and the surrender, which it was not fulfilling in terms of information to the committee. Okay. That is why we recommended for further investigation.
All right.
Thank you.
Good point to end that discussion. But remember, this is a discussion that can't end today, obviously. They're still sitting on it, so we'll definitely have an opportunity to talk about it again and perhaps iron out the kind of contradictory statements coming out of that. But let's talk about Mau, and let's listen to this first.
The Mau is no longer available for human settlement.
There shall be no people inside the forest.
Nimeleta ujumbe kutoka serikali ya kwamba rudini manyumba yenu.
His position becomes a private opinion.
Mimi nimeongea, sinataka nisikie mtu mwingine ataongea alitumwa na serikali kani.
We should give the government an opportunity to really carry out that eviction.
Usisonge hata kidogo, tunakaa hapa hapa.
We need the Mau forest.
Na hakuna kusema ati tutawawa na nani. Hii ni shamba yetu sawa sawa.
Ile mimi nataka niwahakikishie hii Mau tutamaliza.
Mtoto ya squatter amekoja kulia na watu yake masquatter. Wacha mimi nifungwe na hiyo makosa jameni ya kulia na watu yangu.
Obviously, the divide is so apparent. Where do I start? Do I start with Kutuny? Because Kutuny, years ago, remember when the first Mau issue surfaced?
Right.
Remember your claims about the rain coming from the trees or from heaven? Let's start from there. Do you still hold the same opinion?
Now, let me first of all, on this matter of Mau,
yes,
I will start from where it is now. And I will want to say that the eviction that are going on in Mau, the inhumane way where how these people are being evicted, I want to condemn it. As much as I'm in Jubilee, but I don't like what I am seeing in Mau, this kind of eviction that is going on. Ken, I will not answer your question because we campaigned in 2013. And one of the issues that we raised during the campaigns is the issue of Mau. It came on well. It was one of the factors or a political issue that majority of the people rallied behind us. Now, at that time, there were a lot of issues because the cut line, the government during that time went beyond and evicted people on their land. Now, the question that I am asking today, and I will start from this point. We've had just a meeting as members of parliament from Rift Valley. Because we cannot politicize the Mau issue beyond where we are today. We want long-term solution to the issue of Mau.
That does not sort the problems of politicians, you know.
Now,
it's the politicians' problems.
Politics aside,
yes,
Ken, when it comes to this matter, politics aside, and I condemn even the statement from my colleagues regarding this matter.
The ones who are insisting that people remain in Mau.
But you see, what is Mau problem? What is the main issue in Mau? In Mau, there are two cut lines. The first cut line was declared by Asanu when he was the PC. And then there is another cut line that was declared by our government today, which was declared in 2013, that the cut line is along the Nyayo T-zone line. Now, the people who are being evicted today, they are not beyond the Nyayo T-zone cut line.
Okay.
So the question is, who is this person evicting people who are on their land? And their cut line is very clear.
Do you know the person?
Perhaps maybe given another chance after what we are trying to do today, after today as members of parliament, we are going to discuss this issue further.
Okay.
But as members of parliament in the region, we've agreed conservation of environment is key and protection.
Okay.
But at the same time, the people within the cut line, their rights must be respected.
I need to go to Senator Kajwang. You haven't spoken. You know, we gagged you the first discussion.
I was gagged, and I can now be liberal.
Yes.
They say that the lies will run round the world before the truth has put on its shoes. But I believe that the truth always catches up. And Mau is a truth that has caught up with us. I am a fisherman because I come from Mbita, the shores of Lake Victoria. Because of Lake Victoria is because of the rivers that feed into it. Those rivers are because of the Mau. The Mau is not a local issue. And I had a discussion with my colleague, Senator Kipchumba Murkomen, and he told me, you know, he's playing politics that is local because all politics is local. Mau is not local. Mau sustains the livelihoods of not just the people sitting in those forests, not just the people on the banks of the rivers, not just the people on the shores of Lake Victoria, but the people along the banks of the River Nile all the way to Egypt. And let's not think that this is a village thing. This is an issue that will even attract the attention of Egypt and the upstream countries. Kutuny and maybe all of us, we have flown over the Mau, fly over the Mau on a chopper. And you are told that this used to be a forest. And what remains is some maize plantations. This is a disaster that we are holding in our hands that we must deal with.
Okay.
We must depoliticize, we must de-ethnicize. And over the weekend, we said that the government is too disorganized. Because there's no way a member of government, a senior leader in government, Kipchumba Murkomen is not a small guy. He is the number 4 in the hierarchy of politics in this country. The president and the deputy, the majority leader of the National Assembly, majority leader of the Senate. The speakers are appointees. They are elected by a college, not by the people. He's a big guy. Okay. He cannot go local on an issue of national and regional importance.
I see you banning.
Because we do not discuss the Mau issue without digging the roots of the problem. Why don't we forget that this is a simple case of failure of government policy? How did we excise forest land and put it in private land? My heart really bleeds for the people. In Kenya, the peasants are always caught in the mess. Where did we get, or how did we get here? How did we have Nyayo T-zone inside Mau? Why haven't we talked about that? How do we forget talking about the big factories that are there? The only reason we only talk about Mau is when our people are caught in the mess. In the first place, there was a time media, even when the media guys go ask and interview those people, you find them asking a simple question. Why don't you guys go for the person who sold us the land? And it's always one big person or two big people. These peasants are genuinely the ones who bought thinking they are buying something good. So my problem is one, what was the government policy on forest? Have we kept our faith and spirit in saying, let us conserve the forest? When the politicians talk about conservation, how much do they mean about that? I don't think they mean that. That is why you find a government way back from the 70s, 80s, excising forest land, giving it to multinationals, and establishing the Nyayo T-zone, then slowly by slowly grabbing, resettling people, selling to the people, and then now, in order to give it a human face, because if we are to investigate and say who are the people who sold to these peasants, then we end up evicting them during, in fact, look at the pattern. We never evict these people in January, we never evict them in December, we evict them in July, because it has maximum effect. It is cold, these guys are in school, they are poor, they can do nothing about it, they are told where you are titled, they only have land allotment. Who has frustrated them? It is the same government. So I agree on this aspect, that I think as a country we always bury our heads in the sand. We never go into the details. For Mau to happen at the moment, I think we need to do two things. I'll focus on the solutions. Number one, can we focus on the solution when we come back so that I give her an opportunity? Yes. Scheaffer, inhumane manner in which they're being evicted.
Yes.
And we have said, to me, this is more political than anything else. They're allowed in during campaigns and taken out once they're elected.
Mau is about politics, and Mau is about power, and Mau together is about political power. Because the people who own Mau are the people who've always owned Mau, and they will not move. And these are people who control and shift how geographically people are displaced. And it is illegal. What they're doing is not new, by the way. This has been happening for years, and it will continue to happen unless we have people behind bars. And I keep saying it, we cannot have invisible people inside Mau, not evicted, but we are evicting the visible people, the visible poor people you're talking about. Because a poor person is very visible. You can see them and move them. A visible person is somebody who has no idea of what they need to do. They are the lady who will cry and say, I don't even know where my kid is, when these guys came in with their machines and they were throwing us out. That's a visible person. The invisible person is the one who's now maybe rattled somewhere in a corner and has decided, get these people out of my land. Mau is public land. Mau is for national and international, like he said, interest. But we've had people in the Mau. I mean, you and I cannot wake up one day and decide, let's go build a cabin home in Mau. How do we get there? You see, yes, a big guy bought it and a big guy settled some people. Exactly. We have factories, we have loggers in the Mau. How does a government of thieves, a government that cannot even conserve Karura forest, let's even not even go to Mau, Karura forest. Wasn't there somebody whose wife is related to a person somewhere building a hotel in Karura? Then you want to talk about they want to conserve Mau. I mean, why are people lying? Why are people dishonest in public? Why do we think that people are buying the jokes? This is a joke.
Okay. We continue with this discussion. I'm told we have to take another break. When we come back, we'll talk more about the Mau. I'll begin with Scheaffer, but I'll begin with you. But just feedback again, shocking no title deeds for public schools. We cannot allow this to continue being our situation as a nation. That's from Fael Acheng. And from Kokifei, the question is, who is the person behind the eviction? There must be someone. The question we're not answering here. I hope we get an answer when we come back. It's government evicting. Whose government? In whose interest is it? But in whose interest is it? I think that's the question we're not answering, right? In whose interest?
And just oppose it with Kibra.
All right. They're evicting people currently. All right. Time for a break. We are back with Sidebar.
There was no meeting in cabinet where it was agreed that people will be removed and they are going to be dumped at the roadside.
William Ruto is a minister of this coalition government, and I don't know anywhere, either in the cabinet or elsewhere, where he discussed what he said in the public the other day. I repeat again, I consider that statement to be rebellious and destructive.
And the government has said we need to relocate people from the Mau, which is a catchment, water catchment area. And then a minister goes to the Mau and begins to chase them, issuing ultimatums to the same government. My people. Why does that minister believe that those people are more his people than their government's people?
Iko mkutano Copenhagen ama sijui iko mkutano wapi. Sio lazima uwafanye Wakenya waishi kama wakimbizi, waishi kama wanyama katika taifa yao ndio upate ya kwenda kusema mahali pale. Hiyo ni ubepari.
All right, it's not so different from what is being said currently, right? It's just the players have shifted their position, sort of, right? But it's not so different. Let me start with Scheaffer. Listening to that. Yes.
I mean, it's just the people who are saying it are now different. Because when Raila said it, it was about, you know, we don't like Raila, so why is he saying all this? This is not necessary. Nobody needs to listen to him. So now it's turned around and it's still playing the Mtuwetu politics, where now it is touching on a couple of people who we might need. And now that it seems like 2022 is a few months from now, we need these people and we can shift a couple of people. And, you know, I mean, it's ridiculous, Ken. It is ridiculous.
I think succession politics come into play because we have already gone into succession politics, and there's a pattern that I'm kind of seeing. When you replay 2009 and now, in this case now you find the deputy president being at the receiving end, more or less almost embarrassing him. In fact, it is more or less like he's the one now being almost being embarrassed by the thing. And that's why I'm saying the thing is political. That's why we lose the focus on the policy aspect. And Honorable Kutuny has talked about the cut line. Why haven't we talked about, why hasn't the same been publicized and say this is the position? And the same government, the way Senator Kajwang was saying, being confused in terms of why don't they have a common ground? this is the catline, let's deal with it. But you see, the end product is about the politics. And I think this is not a new thing. The Mau politics is very sensitive and personal to the Kalenjin, importantly in Narok County itself, because you're now playing the two groups, Mau versus the Kipsigis who are there. The moment you throw that, as a country we are more political than objective. So I think, as I was telling you, the solution being, can we depoliticize? How do we depoliticize? This is the best time. It's only that succession politics are here. At the center of it all will be, of course, the deputy president. So at the end of the day, if we can focus and say, let the government agency deal with it.
But how do you do that and yet the foundation is politics?
You deal with that because we cannot politic now. We are we are basically 2018. Secondly, focus the discussion on the issue. One, all of us here agree it's conservation. Yes. Number one. Number two, we talk about human treatment. Those two can be done concurrently. In what way? I've said I have a problem with the timing. We always evict during the cold season to have maximum effect. Okay. Why don't we first do this? Even at the county level, we always do public participation. Why don't we first do this? Let us agree on a policy. Let it be approved by Parliament and the Senate, for example. Then take to the people there, go explain to them, tell them this is the position, this is what we're going to do. Let the government come up with a policy and say, are we compensating or not? Okay. Then implement it. Simple. Okay. Yeah.
You know, listening to the two lady and the speaker, with due respect, you know, when we take this matter of Mau to the political level, we are losing the focus. Mau, if you tell us today that it is a political issue, so then who want to undermine who? And it is the same government that is evicting people. But I want to revisit that statement by William Ruto, Raila at that time, because I was part to it. And say for me that my clip perhaps maybe wasn't played. But the issue that we are discussing today is that there are two groups of people in Mau. There are those people who are inside, who are cutting trees, burning and selling charcoal. As we are talking today, those people, they have been evicted. There is no, or there is none in the forest. That is one. And then two, there are those people who are within the cut line. And I'm calling the minister or the cabinet secretary for environment to come out clear. The cut line is known and it is clearly demarcated. So then within the cut line, we expect it to stop at that point. Anybody beyond the cut line should be removed, and they've been removed. Okay. So then that one is the long-term solution. And then if you put and the government has a long-term solution. We did recommend at that time. And in fact, I remember in 2014, in the office of the president, when I was still there, we did recommend, and the government has adopted that within the cut line, beyond, let Nyayo Tizo take over, plant trees, plant tree, because it is part of the forest. Okay. So then that thing is being implemented. But the issue that we are concerned is the beyond the cut line, the eviction that is taking place. I want, and this is what is in public domain, the discussion that we've had this evening with the members of parliament. We've asked the leader, who is our chairman, the leader of majority, several questions, because it is important also for people to get to know what is our feeling also as leaders. We've asked him, before you go to Mau, did you sort discussion with the cabinet secretary, lands? Did you try to reach out to the cabinet secretary, interior? Did you talk to the minister for lands? And if so, did you also try to talk to the deputy president? Okay. And also, did you try to reach out to the president? Because we believe, and of course you remember a few weeks ago, I did release a statement saying that the leaders, the top leadership of Jubilee, there is no need of washing 30 linen in public. All what we are requesting from them is that if there are issues of common concern, like Mau, it should be sorted internally. Okay. We should avoid this kind of embarrassment. Yes, Senator. Yes.
Lightning doesn't strike twice in the same place. That's a saying. I don't know whether scientifically it's true. The ICC lightning, the Mau lightning, will not strike twice in a similar manner. Kutuny was at his element during the during the Mau debate.
2008, 2009.
And I used to be impressed with how he could put on a straight face and say the things that he used to say then. And I think that was a moment to use Mau as a political tool. There was a moment to use ICC. Political propaganda requires timing for it to be effective. And if we want to use this as a political tool for 2022, I am afraid my personal view is that it is premature and it will not have the same effect. Secondly, we must ask ourselves, how are we treating the bourgeois in this issue of land eviction? Today in Kibra, there are bulldozers that are rolling, that are bringing down buildings. In fact, I've seen a statement by my party secretary general saying that it has to be done in a humane manner, which sounds very much like what Kutuny and his team is talking about. That humanity has to be there. But don't we all know that Mombasa Road cannot be expanded because of the bourgeois that have taken up the spaces there? Don't we know that Outer Ring Road has got that awkward design because of some bourgeois around Taj Mall or thereabouts? Can't you all name Nakumachuke? We can all name, you go to Kisii town, see the way there are buildings all the way up to the roads. That we don't have the guts to deal with the bourgeois, but we have the guts to deal with the poor of the poor.
Yes. Okay.
Ken, if I was given a blank check by Kenyans, they say that Jaramogi always used to say, I wish I could be president for a day. If I was, my philosophy would be a short story by Leo Tolstoy entitled, How Much Land Does Man Need? And it tells the story of a man who wanted all the land in this world, and when he died, he realized he only needed 6 feet wide and 6 feet deep. Okay. I would change the land system in this country so that we stop this nonsense of people owning 10,000 acres and others being squatters. That has been the source of our problems from independence. Yes. When the white men came, they found us owning land communally. They brought this thing of individual ownership. It messed up the first government post-1963. It has been the common feature of all corruption scandals. Ruaraka was about land, Mau is about land, and so many other scandals are about land. I would say, I would go the route the Tanzanians have taken, or the route the Ethiopians have taken. That's why they're able to do infrastructure projects faster and cheaper as opposed to our country. And I put that challenge to Kutuny, who is in the Lands Committee, that we can be revolutionary.
Okay. I think we need to rest Mau issue unless there's something burning on Mau. I think it's well spoken about.
The resting would be, we agree, as a matter of fact, let the government put a final timeline on achieving conservation of Mau, that we will not have a recurrence of the same eviction, because why do you do it over and over for a period of 10 years? Okay. I don't think environment has that patience to wait. Mother Nature has a way of reacting very harshly to us. So I think where the Mheshimiwa is sitting, if finally we say, let us agree on a final settlement, if we are compensating or not, and if we are evicting, then let it be done once and for all, but the manner which it is to be done and the cut line issue, let it be the final time, so that we can't come back on the same, that every time we have a political circle, we go back on the same. Okay. I think we are playing people, we are making the peasants suffer, the way Senator has said. It's only the poor who suffer.
At the end of the day.
Just to say about the fundraiser.
The fundraiser that they had to resettle the squatters.
But you see,
are they the same squatters on that land?
We did the fundraising, that was then, because the people were suffering, so we had to take food and the rest. And Uhuru, of course, was the chief guest during that time. However, this is something that I want to emphasize on the Mau issue. I am expecting in the course of this week to see the Minister for Environment, Minister for, Water, Minister for Lands, Interior, to have a meeting and perhaps maybe visit that place, sure, come up with a long-term solution. And I'm also requesting the Jubilee administration. This is one of the factor that we used to be in power today. It should not be a matter that is of discussion going forward. I hope now the politicians have said their part. The government should act and bring to this matter to rest. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well said and well done. This is also a conversation that we can't finish today. In fact, I see Gadara has sent me a copy of the newspaper that I think ran then, or the Daily, that should be NTV, explaining what happened on the 16th of July. It's something long we can't read, but this is a conversation that continues. Gentlemen and lady, I'd like to speak lastly in the next 10 or so minutes about corruption. And I'd like to speak about this in relation to what we saw yesterday. Let's first listen to this.
You've been to Kenya Power Lighting Company, the company that has fleeced Kenyans a lot of money through corruption. You are in court on corruption charges. You have the full guts to sit in front of us to demand this job, and yet you haven't settled your issues in court to be declared whether you are guilty or not.
Chairman, I really want to plead with this committee that you should not be invited to this particular situation where then somebody just throws some spanner in the works to deny me this opportunity. I really deserve it.
Whether he appears before the committee or he doesn't appear before the committee, I can comfortably say that Ben Chumo, the nominee for SRC, within the reading of the Constitution and the Public Parliamentary Approval Act, has failed and cannot be approved by the relevant committee that is vetting or the House.
What did we just say there? How did Parliament convene to listen to Ben Chumo?
First of all, who nominated Ben Chumo?
He's the president.
Exactly.
Yes.
End of
He's the
story.
president.
End of story.
No, but that was before. That was before the issues that took him to court came up.
It doesn't matter.
So what are you trying to say? That the president brought this up? He nominated Chumo in spite of knowing there was an ongoing process?
Absolutely. Why not?
He was an advisor to the president. At what point does the president get cancelled?
He has intel. But wow, this is a comedy. Let's start from the beginning. This is the same president who comes on and says, hii mambo ya ufisadi Mungu moja itaisha this time around, right? I swear, he's speaking very harshly about corruption. Then he goes and nominates the person who's in court, has an active case, ongoing case about corruption. Really, he has intel. He's advised. He's briefed. Well, Uhuru needs to be serious. Because you know what? We would have not been even witnessing this if he was a little bit serious and committed to fighting corruption. I cannot say, or you cannot say, practical example, we are seated here in your studio. You cannot tell us, come, we will end late, I will ensure you're safe. Then the first people we meet when we walk in are people whom we know are going to rob us. Are you serious about ensuring you're safe? Are you serious? Okay. That's the thing. I mean, I don't have anything else to say. We would have not had this person being vetted.
Is it the problem? Forget about the president nominating him and the intel he had.
Yes.
The fact that this came before the public and the public know he's in court and he still had the guts to go and sit before
But
Parliament.
that is the audacity that Kenya generally has given to thieves. When you have thieves in public government offices, as a thief, you feel qualified. In fact, in Kenya, to qualify for public office, you have to steal.
Okay.
When you steal, you qualify for the highest office, especially when you steal and you're not caught. You become the perfect candidate to run the biggest office. We have seen them. We can name these people. People who will never be held.
Kutuny was the advisor to the president, political advisor though. But at what point does the president get cancelled? At what point does he get advice?
But at the same time, you know, I will answer you very simple. Yes. That the president doesn't want to interfere with what is happening in other state agencies, because that will be
if he was advised that we are investigating Chumo, would he still go ahead and appoint
the president, you cannot go, if you are an investigator, you cannot go and advise the president and tell the president we are investigating so and so, because the office is mandated to do investigations. So DPP is doing its own separate investigations. And of course, by the way, public has been concerned with the issue of executive interfering. So I will talk on this case, by the way, Uhuru, and I want to put it very clear. He's not the kind of a person that will interfere with agencies when they are carrying out their work. But then two, when we talk about corruption, regarding even this matter of, you know, Ben appearing before the committee, there are two things which are very important. I'm not a lawyer, but there is always this issue of you're not innocent until proven otherwise.
You're not guilty.
You're not guilty until proven otherwise. That is one. And then, of course, two, if also Kenyans, and our sister here, she's very serious in fighting corruption. This gentleman appeared before the committee of Parliament. Public participation as an opportunity for people to participate. No single Kenyan appeared
Did Parliament invite Kenyans?
No. Of course. Now, it is before we discuss a matter in Parliament, there is period for public participation.
But
now,
honestly,
like I am putting
like in this case,
I am raising my issue, yes, my brother. There are two things that will happen, and members of Parliament, we are entitled to our own opinion when it comes to this matter. I was in the president office in 2013, 2014, 2015, up to 2017. In 2015, because of too much corruption perceived that was happening at that time, we did recommend and advise that the president must crack the whip. 17 people, over 20 senior government officials, 8 ministers were sacked by the president. Now, when they went to court, they were cleared. We want to, when we talk about the issue of corruption, there is an element of addressing the issue of corruption, but at the same time, we must not also destroy careers when it comes to the issues of corruption.
Okay.
But then, when it comes to Chapter 6,
okay,
of course, if it's a discussion.
I'll quickly answer this way. When it comes to Ben Chumo, let me be fair to him this way. From a legal point of view, he's innocent until proven guilty. But again, something about public office is also about public perception. If I have appeared in court, personally, I'll recuse myself. I'll say, in the court of public opinion, I'm already adjudged to have an active case. That's why we go to EACC for clearance. Number 2, I think the president is the most informed person when it comes to intel, and that is real-time fact, not just hula baloo, or I'm sure he was aware. So I think it even pulls the, it pulls the rug from the fight, because the president is the one who's carried the banner about fighting the corruption. And there's something I want to acknowledge different this time. I find the entities more effective. DPP, DCI, they seem to be doing the investigation that by the time a suspect is brought before the court, you find them ready with a charge sheet. Previously, it was a case of, we hold you, we arrest you, then we start working on the charges. That was the... So I think when it comes to corruption, there are two things here. The legal process cannot be done within 3 days. It takes a long time. A case like that may take a year. If you saw the KPLC matter, how many people were charged? Up to 26. That will take a long time. They'll have to get separate charge sheet. Now, what happens? Because you want to gain public confidence, you want to run the thing like a steam. And I want us to look at cases in the world, what has happened. Drastic measures are the one that can save the ball rolling. The drastic measures we are doing right now through the DPP and the rest can only be done if the perception war is also won. If you are howling people in court, but at the same time, the same person can come appear before Parliament, it mocks the process. And that is why, in fact, personally, I was really surprised by Honorable Duale. I didn't expect that from him, and I think he said the right thing. As the leader of majority of National Assembly, he said it well. Even in my assembly, I would have a problem if the same coming through, because I would say, in the interest of public perception. Do you remember Phil Keniso for EACC?
Yes.
He recused himself, he resigned, he said, because of issues, simply because of conflict of interest.
He was pushed out. Senator Kajwang.
Well, at some point you are one of the most optimistic people in the world, but this has given rise to pessimism of the highest order. In fact, I listened to my colleagues talking, and there's a lot of pessimism, and this is because of this corruption and this feeling that we seem to be losing control. And this pessimism is leading to cynicism, even for people who are naturally optimistic like myself. And this cynicism, you ask yourself that in 2013, we elected a president and a deputy who are facing charges at the ICC. Charges of rape, murder, eviction, forcible transfer, the worst kind of charges that you can ever come across that Kenyan law could not try. They had to go to The Hague to be tried. And we elected them as president and deputy. You know, you have to forgive me for being cynical about some of these things. Okay. But coming back to Ben Chumo, as a chair of a committee of parliament, there is no way I would refuse to vet Ben Chumo. Okay. Let's just understand that. I know there's a court of public opinion which has judged the matter, but procedurally, if it was my committee that was to vet Ben Chumo, he has to present himself. Right. And even the speaker cannot stop Ben Chumo from appearing before that committee. Okay. It is before that committee that Ben Chumo can then say that, gentlemen and ladies, because of the matters that are currently under investigation, I give up this opportunity. Or he insists, like he's insisting, that he's being denied an opportunity to do the job. Okay. I would expect that this committee, if it's a committee that listens to public opinion and to the aspirations of Kenyans, that the report they'll bring to plenary, where Kutuny sits, is a report that says that we vetted this particular person, and on account of Chapter 6, we found him unsuitable to chair the SRC. And I would expect...
Is that the statements from Duale, do they undermine this process?
No, well, somehow, but
because he has preempted.
He has concluded, but he's a member of the assembly. Exactly. He will have one vote when it comes to the plenary.
But
before the plenary.
I want to raise something regarding the statement by Duale. And this is why I speak differently from the leadership of the parliament. Because Duale had made an opinion earlier before. He had even pronounced himself within the premises of parliament that he's not going to endorse chairmanship of Ben Chumo. So it is not different. Okay. Actually, he just got an opportunity to hit back on Ben.
Okay.
But I think I stand with the report will come to the parliament.
To the House.
And then Parliament will decide.
Yeah. So it's important, Ken, for us to tell the public that all is not lost, that this is not being forced. I'll be shocked.
But how do we trust? How do we trust?
Well, I'll be surprised if the committee recommends that Ben Chumo is fit for the job, because Chapter 6 of the Constitution...
Senator, you can't say that, and we have a parliamentary committee that approved a cabinet secretary without papers.
Exactly.
How would you trust the same parliament to not to approve Chumo?
No, was there a requirement for the cabinet secretary to have papers?
No, but it's basic. It's basic requirement to be there.
Let me be the devil advocate. Let me be the devil advocate.
But perception,
because
you just talked about perception.
I talked about perception.
Perception, perception is different. Ken, let me take an example of you, because I am planning in my government. In the future, you will sit in the cabinet. But I don't want people to take advantage of their position and destroy your career.
Okay.
Because it has appeared nowadays that even the top reigns are being destroyed in this process. Let us give people a fair chance. So then we attract the best people. I don't want that in the future when you serve in government, then some people bring allegations and yet you're taken to court and then you lose your job. Because people can play games.
All right, gentlemen and lady, I'd like to conclude this discussion. But first, we have introduced a few elements on Sidebar. The first one, just 15 seconds comment on this, is the tune side. 15. All right, that's the government, basically the government doing business. It was on Daily Nation today, right? You do business, you advertise land, I want to buy land, you talk to yourself, and then you do business with yourself. Just quick comments if you have to about government.
And then after doing business with yourself, the government sets up a committee to investigate the government and how the government did business with itself.
That is why
that's a continuation.
When it comes to compensation and buying purchase of a public-private land, it is the same thing. In fact, that has captured very well. Government buying for itself, investigating itself, then recommending against itself, and then buying again for itself.
3 times.
I mean, that's why I said we need to just figure out who does what, where, and why, because we can't have one person doing everything. You know, it keeps the cycle of injustice and the cycle of corruption going, and the theft. Really,
I think I will answer it very clearly. Is that government institutions needs to rise up to the occasion to answer this issue. So then, institution must be held responsible when it comes to government transactions.
All right. We are concluding now because we have to do the time bar. I'm giving you an opportunity now to conclude. Let me start with you, Speaker, on the issue of Ben Chumo and Parliament. I know it's so clear from the committees they can't stop, but nothing is lost. Let's conclude on that.
My conclusion would be, to be fair to Ben Chumo, one, he was given a chance to give his opinion. I think the parliamentary committee now has a responsibility to be able to balance the public interest at the same time with the facts. Honorable Kutuny has said so well. The beauty with parliamentary matters, when the report will be given to the parliament, it has to be justified. Every time you have such a report which is kept in Hansard, it has to be justified. My opinion would be, honest opinion
Okay.
that I would even advise Ben Chumo himself to recuse himself and say, in the interest of public, let me go clear my name.
Then I
and
come
because
back
of
to
that,
this. Okay.
someone else can take this position. Because you can imagine where you have that cloud of suspicion and you're given a position, the perception would always be negative, however good he'll be. And you know, I really feel for him because he said he's had 32 years of stellar career in public service. You can only secure that if you say, out of moral consideration and public perception, I'm going to clear my name in court.
Conscience.
Well, I want to give an assurance to the children studying in Drive-In Primary and Ruaraka Secondary School that they should continue their learning undisturbed, knowing that Parliament and relevant institutions will get to the bottom of this issue on the land. And I want to assure the nation that what Senate is doing is complementary to what the National Assembly is doing, and we hope that we'll shed light on this matter and put a stop to the looting that has been occasioned through land policies that don't make sense. And finally, on Mau, the guys playing village politics with Mau, please know, it's not only the guys from Narok who will come for you. The people of Nyando, Miguna will come for you. The fishermen of Lake Victoria will come for you. And even the Egyptians will come for you. Mau is not a village affair. Let us not ethnicize it. Let us not use it to settle local scores. Let us look at Mau in its totality as a water tower that feeds the entire region.
I think we should stop gentrifying theft. We've gentrified theft too much, and it has cost Kenyans lives, it has cost opportunities, and now we've got into a place where theft is literally robbing us of intangible things, right? And people have nowhere to go, and a lot of Kenyans who are young people do not have any hope for tomorrow. And I'm totally with them with the pessimism and the cynicism. And we should stop condoning people who we know do not have a clear track record of leading institutions and leading this country. Okay. There is no deficiency of qualified Kenyans. We cannot behave as if there's only a certain number of people who can hold certain number of positions. We are 40 million plus. There are so many of us out here. Not all of us are thieves. Kenyans are hardworking. There are very many of us out here with track records. If we want to be really serious about where we want to take this country, we must stop condoning and engaging with people who have questionable track records.
I want to say in brief that I support Uhuru Kenyatta on the issue of lifestyle audit and whatever vetting that is going on among the directors in various dockets, because this is one way of trying to stop corruption. And then, of course, too, on the issue of what is going on in government, I think it is high time that the concerned people in government needs to rise up to the occasion. We will want to see a coordinated system in government so that we don't experience these issues of Mau where people are being evicted. We want the conservation of Mau to be a priority of this government. Okay. And even other water towers, Embobut, Cherangany, and many other places. On the issue of Parliament, Parliament is ready and very prepared. And it is going to follow the law to the latter. We are not going to bend the law. We are not going to use the positions that we have as members of Parliament to perhaps twist or intimidate anybody. Anybody appearing before Parliament, procedurally, we will vet. Okay. But eventually we will make decisions as members of Parliament. Thank you.
Not more than 10 seconds. I also want to propose something. Yes. As a public official myself, I think it is time also for us to take personal responsibility. Okay. That wherever position you hold, if I'm a speaker of a county assembly in Nandi County Assembly, I have to take the way he talks about. Let us not even point. We shouldn't just come here and point and say someone should do something. Let individual, if you have a public official, elected, appointed, we should take personal this kind of personal responsibility and say, where I sit, I will oversee public resources and I will ensure that there's prudent use. The moment individual responsibility comes into play and we commit individually, things change. I want us as Kenya I think we should check Ethiopia. One individual prime minister is changing everything. So if all of us, starting with myself in Nandi County Assembly, does that, then it means all of us will change.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. And lady, thank you. Before we end, we'd like to end, but first let's take a few feedback from you. Let's see what you have right there from Salome. It says, accurate discussions. Another question, why has NEMA allowed flower farming and hotels inside Karura Forest? The next one, good question there. And Mayaka Nyaroro, as long as the cut line is set by the politicians, we will still keep revising and we will end up with no forest. Paddy says, we have been suffering from constipation since 1963 and we are yet to change our diet. Good observation. All right, and Prince Vince says, I think this Mao eviction is trying to shift us from lifestyle audit and corruption anyway. Hashtag borrow high. And the Baron says the question we should be asking is, were the people given notice to vacate? They shouldn't have been there to begin with, especially after the cut line. And the last one, how are the Mao people different from Kibera residents? Mheshimiwa raised it here. Kwani watu wa Mao wako na nini wa Kibera hawana? I think Senator raised it aptly well. All right, and before we end tonight, so tonight, as you point about everything we've been talking about here, especially Mao Forest, the largest water catchment, the lifeline of several rivers, here is something to jog your memory. Exactly 9 years, 2 days to the date today. That was on the 22nd of July, 2009. This is affected by the constant move in, move out of Mao, those who illegally acquired land in the Mao, and even those who illegally occupied part of Mao, including those who were duped into buying land in the Mao for value. Though it will be settled, one thought it would be settled once and for all. Well, 9 years later, we are still at it. Times have changed, but the players and the language has remained constant. Now, the Prime Minister Raila Odinga reached a deal with the contesting and contending parties then and get together encroachers out of Mao. In the deal, both legal and illegal settlers were to be paid to get off the forest. 38 billion shillings was also injected to rehabilitate the destroyed parts of the forest. Now, this agreement was reached after almost 2 hours of a meeting attended by William Ruto, then Cabinet Secretary Henry Kosgei, the late William Ole Ntimama, and other leaders from the region. Ironically, we are now at the same place we are 9 years ago. Thanks for watching the program. My name is Ken Mijungu. Just as we leave, just start in one newspaper once again, where we reported that, if we can say it, the newspaper. All right, those are the headlines. Raila strikes a Mao deal with Rift Valley MPs. Right, that's where we end. I'd like to thank my crew. That's good. I'd like to thank our crew right here, and special thanks also to my guest today, Scheaffer, Kutuny, Senator and Speaker. Thank you very much for coming. Let's do this again next week, same time, different issue we'll definitely discuss. Remember, issue of Mao, issue of Ruaraka, we still have it. They're still on it. Thank you, gentlemen, and thanks to my crew right here. Good night.
Thank you, Ken.
Good night.